Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. Hope you're having a fantastic day. We're taking a quick look here at some important factors such as CME gaps here that are still left remaining open from the weekend, a quick comparison on all the coins here we're planning to cover today, as well as the manipulative power of three type of trade setup that we see so commonly in the market that's playing out right now as we speak. So let's talk about Fear and Greed Index, crypto market overview, kind of the more important stuff here as a baseline, and get to the other stuff here shortly. So starting off with the crypto market overview, the simple way to understand it is that we're starting to see a lot more greed pile in. And generally speaking, the concept is to sell the greed and to buy the fear, right? So as this number increases, you may want to consider securing some profits because we might start to be topping out here with the double top at that 123.3K resistance for Bitcoin, or just in general, that's kind of the natural capitulation type of scenario here where you want to sell the greed. However, I'm not telling you or proposing that you just short your shirt off, but I am telling you here that crypto market, altcoin season index, and just in general the market right now, altcoins didn't respond super favorably to that pump yesterday from Bitcoin, and that's actually a good sign. I kind of like that personally. It kind of helps us pick out the outliers there and understand that Bitcoin dominance is probably on the rise, right? Either way, crypto market altcoin season here essentially is still in good shape though. Keep in mind, even though prices didn't go up, they also didn't go down super significant. We're at 1.61 trillion still here for crypto, basically altcoin season index. So that's an important thing to recognize. Okay, so that's good. And we take a quick look at the ETF net inflow or outflow. Keep in mind, this is obviously a lag. This is based on 4 trading days ago, because this is Friday, if I'm not mistaken, or Thursdays. We can see here there is a total amount of 461 million for Ethereum and 400 million for Bitcoin. And basically just kind of implying that with ETH on the rise as far as ETF net inflow, that's generally a favorable sign. And we saw that happen throughout the weekend. Let's take a quick look here at the CME gaps here that are existing here so far with Sol, Bitcoin, and ETH. We can see on the right-hand side here, Solana not performing extremely well versus the rest of the market. And we can see that CME gap has already been filled. So nothing to worry about there. Ethereum, however, has a pretty significant CME gap, upwards of 4175 is a round number, to the gap of approximately, I'm going to round up and say 4200. So 4075 to 4200 is that rough estimate of that CME gap that still is yet to be filled. And the same thing here as well with Bitcoin, 117.5 to 19.1 is that current CME gap for Bitcoin. Now let's take a look here at the overview here of these 5 coins we're covering today and just kind of give you perspective. In case you're not familiar with my charts, white is in this case here is basically just going to be our support range, because that was a previous resistance for us, and now we have the current resistance ranges in red. So to clarify, all-time high for Bitcoin 123.3, our local high here about 4400 for Ethereum as well. That's based on liquidation, and we can see 185 is consistently retested from Solana and essentially hasn't been broken yet. And then of course as well, SUI has a resistance at $4. We've talked about that a lot. And 343 is that current resistance for XRP, which hasn't officially been tested, but if we see that area, that's a good consideration for a short. I talked about that late last week. Now, do we just jump into a short blindly right now because the price is pulling back? Not necessarily, but I would say statistically at this point, we are looking at, we could see altcoins continue to pull back as just kind of a safe presumption based on how poorly they're responding in the last 24 hours. All that being said, here's that manipulative power of 3 trade setup. If you're not familiar, I do have that trade, kind of like the explanation of how it works in our Discord that is found in our education section. There's a lot of good content here, but just to clarify, a power of 3 trade setup is essentially just a manipulation trade setup where we accumulate, they manipulate the price to go lower, trap late shorts, and they jump the price action on you. So that's basically what's happening right now. We are in the midst of this continuation higher. So it would make sense for Bitcoin to push towards its 123K resistance and potentially even break that and to sweep any of those extra late shorts. Let's go ahead and take a look at those extra late shorts here and see kind of what that looks like here on the back end data. And first of all, we can recognize that bull flag pattern has broken out. And keep in mind, the price didn't break out because this magical flag pattern. It's just really just kind of confirming that as the price consolidates into a lower low, lower high pattern, it typically bounces off its local high, which is 112,000, which we saw a candle wick down there, and essentially the price bounce. I can show you on the charts what that looks like. I've been talking about that for a while, but that's essentially the concept. All that being said, we look here, we can see this is the average top trader here. And these are just high volume traders, kind of an accumulation of that. And what this basically tells us is that we have a lot more longs than shorts. People with a lot of money are taking longs versus shorts. That's a simple way to understand it. We can also see there is more bids than asks right now. So more buy orders than sell orders overall in the market. When we look at the back end too here, we want to recognize 120K was that open interest resistance. I mentioned 118 and 120. Now we can presume 120 may be the new support because we've broken through that, and once a resistance is broken, it's commonly retested as a support before it continues higher, especially when there's price discovery involved, and we are on the edge of that right now with 123.3K essentially on the horizon. All that said, liquidation long delta is at about between 15 to 20 billion. It's a super significant number. If we look here, this is the 1 month time frame. Keep in mind the 7-day liquidation has been mostly swept. I can show you that here in a second. But from a macro perspective, look at this. Shorts just don't learn. They keep adding to their position, keep putting in essentially, adding to their margin, and we're seeing a big concentration here at 129. I'm not proposing we're going to see 129 right away or immediately, even maybe not even for a while, but just know that liquidation is essentially just an area in which people have stop losses and or liquidation events that could occur. So this implies there's a lot of late shorts in the market right now with lower leverage, thankfully, because the liquidation event's further away. Those that have higher leverage here locally at 120, 122.5, upwards of 124 are probably likely they're going to be the next targets here if the price continues higher. So that's kind of where the back end is at right now. We can see this current fair value gap just got pretty much mostly filled there with the price action wicking down to our 0.65 fib level, that 119.2K range. So when we look at the daily time frame here for Bitcoin, the important thing to recognize is that we're maintaining above all moving averages. As we talked about previously, we were above 50 in the RSI, stochastic swinging up there. We had all the telling signs here leading into the weekend and throughout the weekend that we're going to continue higher. Now, does this mean you want to consider taking a long right now? It's difficult for me to want to take a long in a situation like this. If we do continue to consolidate at 120 or higher for the next couple of days, I might be interested. The reason why is because we can see a pretty obvious resistance shelf here with our previous overextension at about 120,000 even. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, approximately 9 days in the last, maybe 30 days of retesting that 120K resistance range. We have yet to close above it. So if we close above that today, that may be a good buy signal, right? Between now and then, we got to pay attention to volume. If this volume right here continues to maintain itself, we're going to be in good shape and we're going to see price action continue higher. And then obviously tomorrow we'll have more information on our ETF inflows, and we're going to go ahead and see kind of what that looks like as well. Because you got to keep in mind there's always a lag here. It waits till the trading day's closed, and there's always about a 2-day lag. And we actually have a 4-day lag now because of the 2-day weekend. So there's that as well. Either way, quick summary here. Bitcoin's looking pretty solid. To continue higher, we just got to wait it out a little bit longer and try not to be one of those, try not to FOMO in right now to either a long or a short. It's best to be patient in situations like this. All right, so let's move on to Ethereum, kind of see what's going on with the back end here first, and we'll take it from there. Ethereum is, as per usual, super strong, kind of the front runner for altcoins. And generally speaking, when that happens, altcoin season index is usually going to highlight that we have further continuation higher, right? Altcoin season is generally going to continue or start essentially when Bitcoin is, when Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin quite significantly. And we can see Ethereum's moving towards its all-time high and that rough estimate about 5,000. So take a look here. This doesn't tell us too much, honestly, open interest. There's a heavy concentration well below the price action. We don't got to worry about that for a while, but the heaviest concentration here locally is 39.80. So if we do see if we do see the price action pull back, we will see probably more people or whomever it is that's adding to their position will try to protect that level. So 4,000, if retested, would be a solid consideration for a long, just kind of shooting from the hip, based on the simple fact there's a lot of open interest there. And usually open interest implies support or resistance, depending on which side you're on. All that said, 25 billion liquidation long delta, you don't want to short against that. You're much better off waiting for 4,000 that may never happen than trying to short to that level, because the odds are against you that the price is going to go down versus going up. All that said, 43.50 upwards of 44.50 is that next area of liquidation. That's a super solid chunk of liquidation, okay? When you see that light blue color, that implies we got a lot, and each one of these bars is about 2.5 billion, and there's a good chunk of them. So we're probably talking about 10 to 20 billion liquidation right there between now and 4,500. Okay, and these are just the shorts that don't seem to learn. All that being said, We're at an 8 now on TD sequential on the daily time frame for Ethereum, basically implying that we have 8 days of continuation with no retracement. Oftentimes you'll see a 9 plus 2, 3, or 4, and the price will start to slow down and pull back. If I'm not mistaken, Bitcoin is at a 7 right now, so we're starting to see some slowing pressure there based on the fact that we're hitting that resistance range. Well, Ethereum doesn't really have a local resistance range. If we look at the weekly, we pull back here, kind of zoom out, we can see our all-time high, 49.51 on the Binance chart. That was roughly back in 2021, November 21. Okay, so that's essentially where we're at here. We're approaching the all-time high territory, but we're not quite there yet. Having said that, between now and then, it's just one of those situations where these overextensions don't mean too much because there's just a ridiculous amount of volume flowing in. Okay, we're above all moving averages. There's really no sign here to tell you you want to consider shorting unless you want to consider a high risk short that has low probability of playing out. That's kind of the concept there. But once more, these volume bars are super large, and you don't short against that. That's a simple takeaway here. There's not much else to extract. Everything's fully bullish on this coin. You're much better off, taking a long versus a short. But if you do take a long, ensure you secure profits between now and 44.50, because based on local liquidation, there's not too much, upside potential on that long, depending on what kind of leverage you're using. So take a look here at Solana. What's going on here with Solana? Well, the easy way to understand it is it's extremely underperforming. I don't really like the Solana chart. I've talked about this for the last week, roughly. That is just kind of not really the greatest potential, only because of just the way the chart's playing out and the backend data too. Okay, so let's talk about that. Try not to take offense to the fact that I just verbally bashed your favorite coin. It's not doing well, right? Because if you do take offense to that, you probably don't belong in trading. All that said, what I'm getting at here is 167 and 185, those two heavy concentrations of open interest, therefore resistances. You can also see that reflected here for Solana, which is this guy right here. You can see we got our resistance at 185 and our previous support at 168. And that was an area in which you want to kind of understand we're fairly well range bound in that range. So until that range is broken, you're better off buying the dip and shorting the top. That's essentially the concept. All that said, we can see liquidation long delta is only at about 1 billion. This coin commonly ranges between 2 to 4 billion when it's overextended. So for the most part right now, it's pulling back, makes perfect sense. Not a ton of volume left here. We do have a little bit of liquidation, upwards of 190, and then a lot more close by here, down as low as 170. So that's not like a significant margin, but a short to 170 seems to make more sense than a long to 190 from right now, just based on the way that altcoins are performing. Speaking of the way altcoins are performing, I'm sorry, I forgot to look at this here. This is Bitcoin dominance. It's still fairly well range bound, but it is establishing lower highs and lower lows. So this is still favorable for altcoins. Okay, so keep in mind altcoins are in decent shape here overall because of that. That's just kind of the effect, not the cause. It's not Bitcoin dominance that's causing the price to move. It's basically just a reflection of what the market's doing. Anyways, what I want to get at here with Solana is a simple fact that we got a resistance at 185. It's not just open interest that's kind of reinforcing that. It's previous high closures, as well as our 0.618 fib level at about 188 to 187. Once more, if you add confluence to fib levels, they are much more substantial and therefore more reliable. So, just some food for thought there. If you take in, Elliott wave and all this other theoretical stuff into consideration when you trade, that's all well and good. But if you're not adding confluence, there's not multiple confirming factors at those locations, fib levels mean very little. Granted, the 0.5 fib level is a common area of retracement, but it's just one of those things where I just want you to be careful with that, because there's so many people in our community that are just stuck on stupid when it comes to just only using fib levels, and it's just not really the way to trade. All that being said, 4-hour time frame is reflecting here that we're above majority of the important moving averages. We're kind of testing the 20-day. I don't care too much about that, but we're over 50 on the RSI. Stochastic, while swinging down, money flow index is right there with the price action. If we continue to see the money flow index lower than the RSI, then I would say it may be a good consideration to short. But for right now, I don't really think it's best to trade this coin. It may break out. It is ranging very well. A lot of coins are doing so also. But if Bitcoin does have a bad day and pulls back, which it's still susceptible to doing, then I think Solana will pull back with it. So just be mindful that Solana is kind of that knee-jerk reaction coin for the moment. And the same thing can be said here about SUI. Let's talk about SUI next, and just kind of head and start with the backend data first. things to recognize here. I've emphasized this significantly yesterday and the day before. $4, $4.20, those are the two heaviest concentrations above the price. This amount of open interest is super substantial at $4. So folks are going to sell when the price gets close there to kind of reverse their upside down positions. Because you got to understand, these people that took longs at $4, they've been holding that position open since July 25th, right? So they've been in the red for about 2 weeks, and now they're finally like, hey, I want out of here. So that's essentially what happened. That's why the price rejected off $4. That has a lot to do with it, that psychological effect. All that said, though, liquidation delta has shifted bearish. So big surprise, this coin, even though it was moderately bullish here recently, rejected off that level and is due to continue a bit lower. This is the 1 month over here on the left-hand side. We know that the low $3 range has a lot of liquidation, but let's zoom into the last 7 days and just kind of see roughly where we're at. So taking a look at the last 7 days, we can recognize $4, $4.20, once more, that heavy concentration liquidation. But we've also got $3.40 and $3.60 as the next two areas down below the price. So a short consideration on SUI would seem more sensible or practical based on the significant amount of resistance we're seeing. Now, it may be best to wait because Bitcoin is pushing up right now. If if Bitcoin continues higher, then we'll see SUI also progress higher too, just based on the simple fact that it's having some, it's responding well at this point, but keep in mind that can absolutely change, okay? So we're just gonna go ahead and keep that resistance range on here on the price action. Once again, $4 is that heavy resistance for SUI. Take a look at XRP. This coin is, underperforming versus Bitcoin, right? We can kind of see it here. For the most part, it's not doing super well. Ethereum is probably the only outlier here of the 5 coins we cover to essentially understand that it's just underperforming, underwhelming at the moment. That's typical for XRP because it moves up with Bitcoin and pulls back with Bitcoin in most cases. Problem is, over the weekend, it didn't do either of those two things. So let's double check at the kind of where we're at here. We're working ourselves into a bullish type of flag pattern. This is looking like it wants to break out because it is essentially consolidating here at our 0.5 fib level, more so just that local area of control. We have a lot more volume between 315 and 320. So folks are adding to their position when the price comes in here. And if we continue to establish higher lows here, then there's a decent chance we continue higher. It's kind of that break of that structure. But so far we haven't fully broken it. Just know that that's something we want to look for. On the back end here, let's take a quick look here at XRP and just kind of recognize that there's a lot of open interest at 343. 343 is that open interest resistance range for this coin. And if we look here, we can see liquidation delta. You may not see it on the charts, but it's on my playout chart on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord. It is at about minus 500 million. So we got basically a lot more shorts in the market. And then furthermore, too, we look at the last 7 days of liquidation, ton of liquidation between 350 and 340. So that could be the next target, but there's also a little bit down below as low as 310. So a simple way to understand this is that XRP is still in pretty good shape. It's looking like it's got a type of bullish structure here. But I would be very careful taking a trade on this coin until it shifts gears. Once more, there's not a lot of confirming factors here. It's gonna stop progressing lower. Once it does break this descending trend, that may be a good consideration to take along, okay? Because I do think statistically with that liquidation above the price action and the fact that Bitcoin is running now towards 121K is a good chance that we do see XRP break out, but it's gonna have to break this descending trend first, and you generally wanna wait for that to occur. Try not to be an early long right now, because you could be underwater here soon if the price continues to pull back. But the key takeaway is that XRP is not performing super strong versus Bitcoin, and that poor pairing, if you will, is not really something you want to try to take a long into, especially with liquidation long delta being in the red. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. So those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Why don't you do me a favor, hit the like button, comment below. I forget to always ask that. Join us over at BitUnix too, folks. Phenomenal exchange. We have a new user reward bonus here, so make sure that you take advantage of that if you're a new trader. No KYC or VPN required. Phenomenal exchange. We use them as a community, have been using them for over 2 years now. They've been great to us. So thanks again for the opportunities, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.